ever largest mistake of macroeconomics was discovered. An ever largest mistake of macroeconomics was discovered. Here we announce that an ever largest mistake of macroeconomics was discovered. It began from an estimation by using an Excel sheet. And all things started from this estimation. Its impacts are very large, and it can be called the largest on our human's economical history. But the impacts are all good impact. This is an incident, and this easy mistake can be understood by ordinary people. You also can understand this easy mistake and its large impacts. We have discovered a certain hypothesis related to economics, and which might bring happiness to many people beyond next some hundreds of years, and which might have a very big good impact on the realization of the stable economy society. And this has a major impact on many fields such as investment decisions of each investor, and also lending policy of banks, operations of central banks, price changes, interest rate trends, people's lives, business cycle, and so on. And this mistake can be recognized also by the ordinary people of general society by receiving a brief description if he has a high thinking skill. Even if he is not an expert of economics, if gives a brief description, some will be as follows. It is possible for ordinary working people in general to test all these at their own by the Excel sheet. If he has the high thinking skills which can recognize the error of traditional opinion, we believe in that there are a lot of excellent persons among our readers, which shows a work of consideration to this book. If you can understand and have a good will, we appreciate and thank you for your cooperation to explain this to other people. It was found that money multiplier until now was a mistake, and correct money multiplier is discovered. This alone will be one of the small headlines of newspaper. There has been a lot of criticism to Friedman's money multiplier until now from the previous saying, such as that it indicates no more than simply a proportional relationship because the formula of the court has changed. We'd expected at this time that something might happen by being affected from this change of cause paradigm. However, as a result, the significant impacts far more than expected on the real economy and people life as shown below came out with little by little, also one by one. It is found that in the simulation model of money supply, please see the Excel sheet later, the money supply can be calculated even by the total sum of the loans of each bank issued currency, and this becomes the most appropriate indicator of money supply. In addition, the definition of money supply changes to this total sum of the loans of each bank issued currency. As you know, money supply of the past, M1, M2, M3, etc. has existed multiple of which boundary was ambiguous. But this ambiguous definition becomes inadequate. This change of money supply definition might be said a little bit major incident. The above new definition of money supply can be controlled quantitatively by window guidance financing decision, because it is the sum of the bank's loan amount and issued currency. Since quantitative control is unavailable for M1, M2, M3 because these are deposits, this kind of idea does not come out, and the quantitative control of money supply by this new definition becomes most effective for control of the price level that humanity will be having technique to overcome the inflation caused by the divergence of supply and demand of money. Inflation has tortured people, and it was also the cause of the coup in the long history. That inflation become overcome is of significance in situations where the total amount of loans of the bank is strictly controlled by window guidance, based on the money supply at the new definition of the above. Even by lowering the interest rate, the money supply of this new definition did not increase and will be maintained at a certain level, because even if returned down interest rates increased the loan applications, if banks want to loan them by window guidance, there is no change for the total amount of loans. Thus, under this new definition of money supply, the two of the control of the interest rates level and the quantitative control by the control of the total amount of loans and the issued currency can be carried out separately, independently, simultaneously. A clear division of roles. That is, it is possible to lower interest rates while reducing the money supply in quantitative terms at the same time, even in the inflation trend or the so-called overheating economic situation where the bubbling up corporate performance is a concern due to rising interest rates to suppress the inflation. If based on the money supply by the new definition of the above, we can carry out simultaneously yet a clear division of roles, the inflation suppression with the quantitative control by the suppression of the total amount of loans and issued currency and underpinning of corporate earnings by the lower induction of interest rates. This could not be considered as possible conventionally. This is at just opposite of the common belief and the current practices, which may be referred to as lack of common sense or study. But if there seems to exist a value to be considered even as a hypothesis, it will be very epoch-making incident in the past, because we did not look at the total amount of loans and the issued currency. We did not notice increase of the money supply at this new definition under the economic boom, and inflation had become a trend, and we were trying to suppress the inflation by setting interest rate upward or by the control of interest rates. Regardless of that, this inflation is the quantitative problem of the money supply, which is composed of loans and can be managed by window guidance. Naturally, the effect will be thin and the possibility of a hard landing will increase by this new monetary policy. The biggest wave caused by the divergence of supply and demand of money will be erased in the economic cycle, and especially the fear of a hard landing or overheating of the economy will be eliminated. In addition, the inflation which had tortured the human race, especially for the poor people, become a problem which can be managed unless you deliberately trying to generate. The central bank's monetary policy will also change dramatically, and the bank's business and financing decision will have more aspect of public mission than now. Specifically, the close reporting of the total amount of loans to the central bank will be needed, and the management of total loan based on the instruction of the central bank will be needed. Each of the above items is once being summarized with only main points respectively. In particular, they include things hard to believe, especially for persons who experienced in the common belief and the current practices. But the details of these have been described in this book along with hard evidence of the Excel simulation worksheet. These can be downloaded from the URL listed at the end of this news. We believe that it is possible for you to examine them and to have a reliable judgment again. When you felt any doubt for anything, I hope that you'd ask the decision also to someone else who can most likely have correct judgment, because we also were the ones of the familiar followers of the common belief and the current practices, and we could not believe at first that our conclusion like this came out. However, we believe there are a lot of excellent persons among every one of you who shows a work of consideration. As to this book, suppose, if this is recognized even as a hypothesis which cannot completely deny, it would be a large significance. Much less, if the now commonly accepted theory and current practices might have a little bit of mistake, it might be some historical progress. In addition, the good news is that the contents of this book fit with its so-called term of Pareto optimal, and this does not lead to anyone's loss. Moreover, very many people and all of them will be very happy with this. But, after all, this is too different from common belief and current practices. We ourselves have changed to this concept written here, verifying the logic one by one over the period of almost a year, rather than have changed my concept at once, while just bothering that there's a difference from the common belief. Even today, the deflation countries like Japan is very rare, especially in developing countries. The inflation countries count more than 30 countries in more than 10%. More than 80 countries in more than 5%, although not valid for all of them, but because China and India will also be included at a minimum. So more than 20 billion people is just in relation with inflation in the population. New way of thinking might be able to eliminate the inflation of these countries. Particularly, it might be able to save a lot of poor people from the shrinkage of salary. The 10% means about 1% in a month. So support for them should be urgent. In addition, the economic stability of developing countries has good positive impacts on the world economy. Therefore, we have a favor to ask readers. We hope that the power of readers convey this to the people of developing countries in which poor people are struggling with inflation. The inflation has tortured people's lives until now in many countries. But some bad inflation will no longer appear. In particular, mainly poor people below a normal class suffer from inflation. The rich people do not suffer from inflation. From now on, over hundreds of years of period, we can save poor people as suffering from inflation around the world. There is a claim that in science, every theory is only hypothesis, because there are many cases that a theory which many number of people supported as the right has been reversed and concluded as the error. We had better to think that in economics too, every theory is only hypothesis. Or more, we can also say, if we dare to have more than one hypothesis, it prevents the stereotype and healthy thinking becomes possible. In addition, including the economics, the development of all study can be achieved under the situation where many different theories are exposed to people equally, and the most probable theory or common belief is determined by a lot of people throughout the discussion, or on the cost of it. As for this book, an Excel sheet can be downloaded from the URL listed at the end, and the readers are able to validate this theory by itself. This book is different from the conventional theory of popular opinion, but it will provide an opportunity to consider a new theory before the readers and the experts. From this point of view, some broad-ranging and active discussions are held as for which theory is fit as the most probable theory, and the truth become clear by them, and it is expected to contribute to the happiness and the progress of mankind. Important questions and answers. Q. Does this mean that it becomes able to deal with inflation effectively? There are various courses of inflation. It becomes theoretically possible to deal with inflation mainly due to the divergence of money supply. However, for example, we still cannot cope with such inflations which are caused by cost push or demand-supply balance or the other. More specifically, while monitoring the rate of price changes along with the total amount of loan and the loan ratio, the feedback operations of the latter is performed. Traditionally, there is considerable progress since this has been done by the operation of the reserve ratio and the interest rate. Of course, it is also necessary to take into account the impact of the propensity of cash holdings and the issued currency amount, and, further, changes in transactions demand due to the growth of GDP. Q. What kind of policy can be taken in the economy overheating situation where there's a risk for hard landing? In the new economics, the total amount of loans or the loan ratio can be manipulated separately from the interest rate. Theoretically, cruising speed of the economy is expected to remain by lowering the interest rate while maintaining the prices stable by keeping the total amount of the loan suppressed at the same time, even during case of stagflation. Similar policy is in effect. By the way, lowering of interest rate has the effect of increasing the speculative demand. But if the total amount of loans is held strictly, we can prevent the money supply from increasing. Theoretically, this largely increases the freedom degree of the policy to avoid the risk of hard landing. But even if prices are stable at some extent, still it does not change that large care is required because the psychology of businesses and consumers tend to deflect in floods by the original nature. Q. Can we prevent economic overheating situation itself? It is considered that we can prevent the economic overheating situation itself or the occurrence of inflation itself if we start the monitoring and the feedback management of the money supply by their new definition before the falling to the inflation state or before the situation of economic overheating comes. This is most desirable. The explanation of today ends up here, because it is better for you to download the estimation of Excel sheet from next URL and examine it by yourself. Notice of the URL for download of the Excel sheet simulation. The Excel sheet simulation introduced in this book is downloadable from the page at the following URL. There are 3 versions of Japanese version, English version, and Chinese version. Download URL http monetary.freeforums.org. We should find happiness in the future. Do not look at the mistake of the past.